welcome to Conversations About Life.
Well, good morning, Tehilla, and thanks for being a guest on my podcast.
Hi, well, it's a pleasure to be here.
Well,
Thanks for
thanks.
having me.
So I'm talking with you, and you're in Israel, right?
Yeah, it's 2:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah, it's about 6 a.m. here.
Yeah. Oh.
So this is the first thing in the morning, getting to have a chance to just have a conversation with you here with a cup of coffee, and the birds are singing outside. And
I appreciate it. Thank you.
so my podcast is normally just conversations with everyday, people, but you're not really an everyday person. You seem pretty impressive by your just the things I've read about you. For example, you are a judo champion, and a former Israeli national. A boot camp instructor in the Israeli army, and now you're a business consultant, and you're into some kind of spiritual homeopath, extrasensory business consultant type of things. And anyway, why don't you just start by telling us about yourself? Just what kind of person are you, and what are you like, and that type of thing.
Well, I used to be the Israeli judo champion in my youth, and at the age of 18, I had to quit because I injured my knee. And then in Israel, the army service is compulsory for men and for women as soon as you reach the age of 18. And in the beginning, I was drafted as an excellent sportsman in the field of judo. But after my injury, I became a boot camp instructor for new male recruits from difficult backgrounds with adjustment issues. Which also was a big switch for me, because I always say an individual athlete is someone that has to be self-centered and quite selfish in order to achieve their goals. At least that's the way I was. And to become a commander for recruits which from such difficult backgrounds required that I become completely selfless. So it was a huge switch, which thankfully I managed to do in a very short amount of time, because I couldn't afford not to, as most changes happen when you can't afford not to change. And then later on, I traveled, and I worked for the Israeli airline, and I learned homeopathy, and I did quite a bit of business entrepreneuring. Then I became, lately, in the past years, I became the CEO of an access control company, and I started Bioergonomy for Business, which is my consulting service. It's an extrasensory consulting service where I help business owners to develop their business, I focus on a holistic approach, because the way I see it, especially small businesses, are an extension of the person who owns them. And that's why I think in order to succeed, the health of the owner is also is reflected in the health of the business. So you have to focus on the core, and then it has a ripple effect on everything else. And that's what I use homeopathy for that.
And then besides that, you're a mom, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're a very busy person.
Yeah, although I don't think of myself as busy, which is good. So I am very busy, but because I do things I love, it's more that I just do things I love. So I am busy, but it's a difference. I don't focus on being busy. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And then you also are an observant Jew. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm a religious Jew.
Religious. Yeah. Okay. Well, a lot of that's interesting. You mentioned being other-centered. Well, that's kind of how I thought of it. Like, instead of just yourself and focusing on your own achievement, it seems like you've made a transition to where you're looking at others and more in the coach position of trying to help others to achieve their goals and so forth. Is that a more satisfying type of pursuit? Like, does it, as far as just life satisfaction, do you like being in that mentality better than just being focused on yourself?
Well, I think at the end of the day, when a person follows their calling, it's naturally, both like that you'll have much more satisfaction and passion for what you do. And I look at myself, back at my life as a journey. I had to go through different stages of my development in order to become who I am today. So I think it was right to be maybe in a selfish place in the beginning in order to build myself and my foundations. And once I had a strong foundation, I could go out and be there for other people. But I think it's very important to nurture yourself before you go out and start, giving out to other people. So you'll have where to give from.
Yeah.
And that's very important. I think it's also it has to be done on a daily basis. It's not you always have to take care of number one first, so number one will be able to take care of everyone.
Right. I think for me, one of the things that keeps me from being more focused on others and their achievement or their pursuit or whatever is that when I think of my own self, sometimes I feel like I'm barely holding life together. There's just, but perhaps that just has to be set aside sometimes. Otherwise, perhaps, one is just constantly self-focused. I don't know. But.
I think, look, there were times when I felt that I was in survival mode. And when I was in survival mode, where, just trying to keep things together, I just couldn't afford to be there for other people as much as I am now. So there are different periods in life and different lessons to be learned. And the places where you get to a point where you can't be there to help others, or just places where it's a stage. Everything in life is a stage. Uh, and sometimes you just have to be in that place in order to make that transition. So I think that it's just a matter of being in tune to what you need right now. So if what you need right now is to focus on yourself, then that's what you need to do. And as soon as you're strong enough, you can reach out.
And at this point in your life, you feel like, I guess you could say, like you have a pretty good handle on life. You're at a good place. You feel strong enough to just now to be focusing on others.
At this point, yeah. But that said, something hopefully not. That something can happen in the next minute that will change change my focus. I think the whole point is being open and dynamic and flexible to to what life has in store for you.
Okay. Yeah. Well, tell me about your religion. What's your religion like for you? How do you experience it, and what does it mean to you? And I guess just what's it like being a religious person?
Well, I spent many years studying spirituality and Jewish and Kabbalah, which is the spiritual side of Judaism, before I became an observing Jew. And that was something very gradual. The more I understood the reasons for why things were a certain way in the religious world, um, that's when I decided that I would align myself to that. So one of the basic premises in Jewish Kabbalah is that there are vessels and there's the light that comes from the infinite, from God. And our job is to work on the vessel, to strengthen the vessel, to purify the vessel, And when the vessel is strong and pure, the stronger the vessel, the more light it can hold. So Jewish religious practices are aimed at strengthening the vessel. That's the idea. One of the ideas behind them.
So, so it's practices, and it's about strengthening the body and the mind, and I guess the idea is that then you can hold more life, more of God's spirit, more of or something along those lines. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. You've understood correctly. It's about the stronger your vessel, the more light it can contain, and the more light it can spread. So there are certain practices, religious practices, that are aimed in order to make your vessel stronger, mind, body, and the spiritual vessel, so to speak. And then when that the stronger you are, the more light you can hold, and the more light you can bring to the world.
Okay. And it reminds me of well, this is from the New Testament, but it reminds me of like one of the authors, Paul, speaking about we have this gift in broken vessels. I think he says. So I think he, so that's a little bit of a contrary way of thinking about things, but I guess he's thinking of the fragility of life, and that in I guess from like both a Jewish and Christian perspective, we are broken in some sense, like starting at the beginning with the fall and so forth. But we have in broken vessels, we have the Spirit of God, and we carry that with us as a gift, and it's like a light to the world and so forth. But I guess how so does your religion involve like a relationship? Like what's your I guess I lately I've been kind of meditating on the Psalms, and like King David and the different psalm writers who would write these poetic things about God. Just even one I was kind of thinking about this morning was Psalm 16 about, protect me, O God, for in you I take refuge. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. I have no good apart from you. And, he just goes on, and he has this like warm heart for God. Or Psalms 8, O Lord, our sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. And, he just goes on. So in your practice of religion, what is that relationship like? Does there seem to be like a connection with God as a person who is a God of glory and so forth, kind of like something like King David expresses in the Psalms? Like, is that kind of an aspect of the Jewish religion as you experience it?
Well, the way I think I think one of the I'd say the dangers of religion is that sometimes there can be so many rules or mediators, etc., and you lose the connection with God. We call it the unmediated connection. Let me put it that way. The direct connection, and that's why I try to focus on is keeping a direct connection, and not it's because it's how does that saying go about the trees and the forest? In Hebrew I know the saying, but I don't remember the English translation. Do you remember that?
Oh, that you can't see the forest because of the trees?
Yeah, something like that, exactly.
Okay.
So it's in Judaism there's so many what we call mitzvot, things that your commandments, if that's the direct connection, that sometimes you can easily focus on the commandments and forget why you're actually doing them.
Right.
So I think it's very important to keep a consciousness, a higher consciousness of God. Remember that the commandments are 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 a means, and they're not the objective. It's the objective is to connect to God, and the commandments are a way to better connect to Him.
Yeah. So how did that connection with God first start with you? Was it like a particular event, um, or is it just kind of more of a process, or do you, or are you still looking for that connection with God, or what is that as far as like, that direct connection?
Well, I think children have a much more direct connection, and it's up to the parents to foster and strengthen that connection. However, I don't ever remember having, maybe I think I never, no one spoke to me about spirituality until the age of maybe 18 or 19. And I remember a friend of the family asked me, he had a colleague, a friend of his that came from abroad, and there was a stamp exhibition in Israel. And he asked me whether I wanted to be at the stand, basically at the exhibition, just to work for his friend. I think this was, I don't remember if it was before or after my military service. And so I used to come there. It used to be such long hours, from 10 in the morning till late afternoon, evening, and it was quite boring. It's like a five days or something. But the owner of the stand was this amazing guy, and when he did come, we had all these really interesting conversations. He was like 20 years my senior, and we're still in contact until today. He's a very successful businessman, and he's the one who introduced the concept of spirituality to me. And I remember he sent me the book Conversations with God,
Oh, wow.
1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
and that was so amazing for me. That was my first introduction to God in such a way, and that really changed my life.
Yeah. Um, and what was the main idea of it as far as conversations with God? Um, was it, it sounds like prayer, but what's the main idea behind the books?
I don't really talking about it now, I don't remember anything particularly from the books, because it was just this concept of God being someone that you can kind of talk to and communicate with.
Mm-hmm.
The concept of spirituality was just so amazing for me,
Mm-hmm.
and also the concept of how life is a journey and everything is a lesson, and for developing the soul. All these
Mm-hmm.
concepts that I wasn't familiar with before, even though I was raised in as a Jew, and but there wasn't so much talk about God. was
Right.
That's the thing.
So for me, I grew up in a religious home, but it was very dry. It didn't mean anything to me. I mean, I think it meant something to my family, but to me, it didn't. And I, at a certain point, I tried to do some of the religious things that might help save my soul, so to speak, but it was all, didn't mean anything. And then I went on throughout my teen years and became like a typical American rebellious teenager and just fell into all of the rotten stuff teenagers, can typically get into. And and then I was about 18, and I was just, I think, at a low point in my life, and I just felt morally disgusting. Like, what have I become? And I didn't think I could do anything about it. And I guess in prayer, I called out to God saying, save me from myself and what I had become. And I remember experiencing like a load of guilt being lifted from me. It felt like a real connection with God, whereas I felt forgiven, and something changed all of of a sudden I had an interest in spiritual things. As far as the scriptures, they just, before they didn't make sense to me. Now they just kind of came alive, and I just started eating it up. And that was like the beginning. But what's kind of interesting to me is that guilt, which is kind of like a negative thing, or like feeling morally undone or disgusting, that was like the gateway in. And I've as I've talked with people, it seemed that's a little bit common. Like I've seen that with other people too, not for everybody, but I mean, for some people, there's kind of more of a from childhood or something like that. They feel connected to God. But for me, it was like coming to that very low point and then encountering a person, God, who was merciful to me, lifted that guilt and received me when I just kind of humbled myself and called out to help. Is that, when you're in your conversations with people and in your religion or yourself, is there any commonality, with that experience, like the way I'm kind of describing it?
I've been studying spirituality for 20 plus years, and and I've been studying a certain school of spirituality by a woman which passed away, and her name is Yemima. And she basically spoke. What she talks about is that each one of us has an essence which is positive and a negative load. Okay, and it was interesting what you said about being disgusted from yourself. It's that in order to be disgusted by something negative, it's not the negative load that's disgusted. It's the essential. It's the pure essential part that is the one that even identifies that something is wrong. So there's always there are always two voices. It's the voice of the pure essence and the voice of we call it the negative load. I don't know exactly how to best translate that term.
Right.
And the whole idea is always being able to separate the two, and be and actually act from the pure and positive essence. So the positive essence always knows what is the good and also the good that it deserves. So that part that feels that voice which is disgusted or is guilty is actually the voice of the positive part, which is demanding something better of
Right.
you and of the universe.
Right. Yeah. I guess that's also a concept I'm familiar with as far as like God's law. You look at it in the scripture, but it's also written on the heart. Like we have this sense of what is good and right. And without that, you can't be disgusted because you don't know anything.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Now you mentioned, well, I was going to ask you about homeopathy.
Homeopathy.
Yeah.
Homeopathy. Yeah.
And so I don't know much about that at all. I've heard that being in reference to physical wellness and so forth, but you were mentioning it in connection to business type of things, business consultant, I think, if I understood you right. So what are you referring to when you're referring to that, and how's that connected to your business consultant? Did I understand you right with that?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Because I'm just so because I'm so familiar with the with the terms and what I do. Sometimes I forget that not necessarily everyone else is, and it's very good that you asked. Homeopathy is a form of alternative medicine. Or not alternative. I'll say holistic, because I'm not so sure I like the term alternative medicine, because I think that's the main medicine.
Okay. I
Holistic
see.
medicine is the main. Um, and basically the way homeopaths see it is that physical and mental symptoms are an indication, if I were to explain, to a certain imbalance, internal imbalance. Okay, I'd say even which is spiritual at the end of the day. A spiritual something when something spiritual goes off, it will manifest itself in physical and mental symptoms. Now, in homeopathy, we aim to understand, based on the physical and the mental symptoms, understand what's going on, I say, in the internal or spiritual level, and provide a homeopathic remedy. There are about 5,000 different homeopathic remedies made from different substances, whether from the world of nature, plants, etc., animals, almost anything you can think of. There's also a homeopathic remedy from chocolate and from a dolphin's milk. Okay, so the whole idea is that one of the basic principles of homeopathy is individualization and treating the person as a whole. So when a person comes for homeopathic treatment, we want to hear about all their mental and physical symptoms from their entire life. We want to know about their personalities, their food desires and aversions. We want to know everything about them in order to identify the repeating pattern. Everyone has a repeating pattern, which, like I say, manifests itself in the physical and mental planes. And once we've identified that pattern, we want to match a homeopathic remedy which will help remedy that imbalance, that pattern. So, like I said, so I've got a homeopathic clinic. I've been doing it for over 20 years, and I treat babies, from babies to older people, suitable for everyone. But the principles are always stay the same. We always treat the person as a whole. We always individualize, and we always try to give the minimal dose. In homeopathy, we always try to give less is more, as far as the homeopathic remedy. And that's basically the way I work.
Okay. What's your daily routine like? What kind of rituals do you have in your life? Just how do you go about life day by day?
Well, I think I'm a great believer in schedules.
Okay.
Especially for children. I think it's very important to create a sense of safety and stability, and have these schedules. I think it's also physically important for the body to have set schedules, and then the body has different hormones, whether it's sleep hormones or other hormones that it knows at a certain time, to produce. And then once everything's worked according to schedule, and you're synchronized also with the universe, daylight and night, everything works in a much more harmonious way. So I'm a strong believer in schedules, especially for children.
Yeah. So schedules. And then are there any, what kind of things do you put in your schedule, for your days? Anything that just helps you to be mentally, stable, or, just, or spiritual practices or anything like that? Like, or do you just kind of get up and just hit the day running, or do you have certain things that you do that just kind of help you be settled in a certain place, or anything along those lines?
Well, I thankfully, thank God, I live right next to a forest. So I love taking walks in the forest.
Yeah.
That helps me start the day, clear my mind. If I have an issue, I go for a walk, and then I kind of get the solution sort of comes to me and I get clarity, and then that's very important to me. And I also, before I go to sleep, it's really important to me. It's essential for me to wind down. Otherwise, I find it difficult to sleep. So I try to have dim all the lights. Get the melatonin
Yeah.
going, and just read and keep things quiet after I put the kids to sleep. Um, and
Yeah.
then it's much easier for me to fall asleep. Otherwise, I see if I deviate from that, I pay quite a high price.
Yeah. What's your relational life like? Do you have a lot of close family relationships, close friends, and so forth? And do you have any thoughts about nourishing relationships or love and so forth?
Well, I think that emotional connections are the most important thing in life. Relationships are the most important things in life. And I am very fortunate to be surrounded by the people I love and a very supportive community. And for me, that's the most important thing, to have a community of friends and families, and just to belong to something that's much bigger than myself. And they say it takes a whole village to raise a child, and I think it's true. Not only to raise a child, but just to live a good life.
Yeah, that's great. Do you live in more of an urban setting? Well, you said you have a forest right next to you, so it's
Yeah.
kind of more rural.
No,
Yeah.
I live in a very small village.
Small village. Okay.
Yeah, and that's what I love.
Yeah. And people tend to know each other and so
Yeah,
forth.
I
Huh?
love it when you go and you just kind of wave hello to everyone, and you just know almost anyone that you see. I love that sense of belonging and familiarity.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing, and I think that's the way people should live.
How does your community, what kind of community things does your community do? Like the people around you, how do they spend time together?
Well, I belong to I think I belong to quite a few communities, but I think one of the main things being a religious Jew is the Sabbath. Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
because one of the things that on the Sabbath you don't drive, so where you
Hmm.
start, that's where you finish.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So and the Sabbath is like the main focal point, in religious life. The whole week is basically a preparation for the Sabbath.
Okay.
So Friday nights, as a child when growing up, Friday night dinner was always with we alternated between my father's side and my mother's side. We used to go to my grandparents and have Friday night dinner, and that's
Hmm.
where I used to meet all the cousins. And when I grew up, we weren't religious, so we drove there, and we drove back. But every Friday we'd see either side of the family. Um, and now, since I don't drive on the Sabbath, so either I go spend the whole Sabbath at friends, which is also it's a different sort of interaction when you spend 25 hours with a family. You get
Yeah.
to different depth. So either I'd go and spend the whole Sabbath somewhere, or we're invited, or I have people over for Friday night dinner, and then Saturday lunch. Also, Saturday morning is also when you meet friends. So I think it's very important. It's a real quality time, the Sabbath, when you don't work and you just socialize or focus on the spiritual side of things, and you get to be with your family. There's a saying that more than the Israelites took care of the Sabbath took care of them.
Oh,
So
wow. I like that saying.
yeah. So basically, when you learn about the Sabbath, it's rejuvenating, and it looks after you. I think you learn. It's something that you learn after you actually observe it and do it. Because I can see,
Yeah.
while it's a bit daunting thinking about not being able to drive, it can be, or turn the lights and use electricity. You need to know how to do it. There's quite a bit of logistics involved,
Yeah.
and preparing for it. You can't cook, so you have to have everything pre-cooked. But then you have rest. With small kids, granted, it's not so restful.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you just wish they'd go to their daycare
Yeah.
schedules instead of being with you all the time. But the idea is that it is much more restful than a regular day.
Yeah. I like that saying. Reminds me of like something Jesus said. He said, "The Sabbath is not made for man. No, man is not made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath is made for man." Which
And
is
that's
similar.
interesting.
Yeah, but I like the idea of Sabbath. Um, it's very appealing, but it almost seems like it's helpful if your whole community did it
Yeah.
together.
That's why religious Jews usually live together in communities. So no mobile phones, no computers, no nothing. But no TV. So that's the time also, by the way, when you socialize,
Right.
you socialize properly. But religious Jews always will live in a community in most cases, because also when a Jewish man prays, he has to have in order for the prayer, I'd say, to be accepted, yeah, they have to be 10. It has to be a minyan, a congregation of 10. You have to have a minimum of 10 men for a joint prayer.
I see.
So you need that. You always have to be with at least 9 other men around you for the prayer.
Right.
So that already creates a congregation, which is
Right.
good.
So
These
do you go
constrictions,
to?
sorry, I just want to say, in the end of the day, the irony is that all these seemingly constrictions, they are what brings you to a higher consciousness and freedom once you accept the constrictions. And that's the I think that's the secret of spirituality. It's always the opposite of what you'd expect.
Right. That is pretty interesting. Just some things are not what you would expect, and there are some constrictions, like I don't know, like even love is kind of like a constriction in a way. I mean, it's like giving to others, maybe self-sacrifice, um, and yet that could lead to more personal satisfaction. Um, anyway, what? Yeah, you're. I think, especially in the West here, we're all about progress and just going as fast forward as possible, as we can, and sometimes constrictions and those spiritual disciplines, like you're talking about, can be really helpful, I think, and just very good for nourishing the humanity in us and so forth. But
Yeah, I totally agree. That's a very good observation.
yeah. Um, do you have any? I guess what I would call them are like maxims, or like just little sayings that you keep in mind that help you in particular situations, like sometimes tough situations. Anything like rules of life, or anything that you just carry with you, um, that help you to go forward when things get rough.
I think I always try to bear in mind that every challenge is an opportunity to grow.
Hmm.
So that's what I keep in mind.
Yeah.
Everything that comes through, it's an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to grow. That's the way I look at things. So I always try to take the higher perspective, like what am I this situation that occurs, why is it I understand it's for my benefit, for my greater good. How do I play my part in this?
Right.
It's more like, what does God want from me in this situation?
From your perspective, what is the whole point of life? Um, now, from talking with you and from reading, I know you are into growth and and I think that's and that's a major part of life. Like when you just look at children and biology, everything, it's about growth and becoming something beautiful. But when it comes to why does it even matter? Is it something you've thought about, or do you have, what's your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that's an excellent question. So then they sometimes you wonder what's the point. Okay,
Yeah.
and in a way, I used to be much more, I say much more questioning about things, and the more I studied spirituality and Kabbalah, I realized there were some things that I would never get answers for, and that's okay, and I just had to accept. And some things I would have answers for. So I've also learned, I say humility, and saying, some things I just never know the answers, and if this is just what I'm supposed to do, then that's what I do. It's like being a good soldier.
Right.
So I think the way I see life is all about uh, evolving the soul, and keep on evolving, becoming as close to God as possible through strengthening and purifying the vessel, and trying to spread as much light as possible, which is basically because that's what God does. God, according to Kabbalah, God gives, and we want to be in the light of God. We want to give, but being human, we have to first receive in order to give. So if we receive, we want to receive in order to give, and that's that's the basics as far as I can understand from where I am now. Tomorrow I might have a better understanding, I hope.
Well, Tehilla, what before we wrap up here, you can tell a little bit about how people can follow you and contact you and so forth. But what would you like here? That's basically it from me. What is there anything you would like to bring up? Any topics that are important to you, or just anything you'd like to say or talk about here? Just before we just kind of wrap up the conversation.
Well, I think that what I think is very important, that people learn to look for the answers within. That's something that I think is very important and often overlooked, especially like you mentioned, Western society, and there's so much noise in the background. But I think, it took me a long time to develop my, I say, intuition and extrasensory abilities. It's something that I wanted from a very young age, but it took me a while to develop them or to recognize them. And a lot of it is because I learned to listen to this inner voice, respect it, and the more I respected and listened to it and gave it room, the louder it became. So that, together with strengthening the vessel, is what, and and God, is what actually enables me to do what I do today. And I think if it's very important for people to focus inside of them and to get the answers from there, to connect to their, each one of us has a divine side and a connection to the divine, and we just need to tap into that. So instead of searching outside, if everyone would search inside, I think the world would be a much better place.
Well, thank you, Tehilla. What what would you like to? How can people follow you? Know more about your services, for example, or just anything else that you would like to leave them with?
Okay, so like I said, my name is Tehilla Aloni, and I have a LinkedIn page, and I have a website called Bio for Biz. You write it BIO, the number 4, and BIZ.com. And I think that's the best ways to come to contact me. I like working. No disrespect. I like working with women who are business owners, who have small businesses, And ideally, I like to take this woman through an extreme makeover. So it's like giving a homeopathic remedy, so something that the personal well-being changes, and then and also doing the extrasensory business consultancy. But so after the personal well-being starts improves, we also see an improvement in the business, and we also do the business consulting. But it's just making, like, providing like a whole framework. It's like a big hug. I like to think of it, to help someone grow and become strong and succeed in life. And then when you're in that place, when you're connected, that's when abundance comes in. And abundance isn't money only. It's happiness, it's joy, it's health. Abundance is like everything. Whatever God, just wants to bestow upon us, and all we need to do is just prepare a vessel to be able to hold it, to receive it.
It was really nice talking with you, Tehilla. It's nice to meet you, so thank you very much for the conversation.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure, Will, to discuss things with you and to hear your insights and about your life. I think it's amazing what you do.
Thanks.